Hey guys, and welcome to episode 5 of the 5-day Godzilla special. And in today's last part, we'll be looking at the Legendary Godzilla from Godzilla 2014. This is the first figure we're looking at that is of an American design. And the first design that wasn't a suit. This was a purely CGI character. And I'm not going to be doing a lot of comparison because this figure is so drastically different. But yeah, it's just interesting to look at and to compare how different he looked in his most recent suit from, the rest of the eras. So this figure is by NECA, and it is of course the legendary suit. So let's have a jump cut and we'll talk about the sculpting. So the first thing is to note that how small the head is. It's very, very reptilian. A lot less human, even than the Final Wars. They're all, the Godzilla suits had a certain element of humanity to them. And I think this figure does a good job, this design in general did a good job of making him look a lot more monstrous. The skin texture is again quite scaly, but you've got sort of a leathery feel to it. He's got these gills at the side, which are a new addition to this suit. And the mouth is quite good. What I liked is that the jaw is quite long, but it does have a weird stumpiness to it if you look at it from the front. And I think this is a really interesting design in general, to be honest. If we look at the spines here, you can tell that this is one of the biggest changes, is the spines on all of the previous Japanese Godzillas were sort of dorsal spines that were shaped sort of like maple leaves, or, they were just very big and very prominent, and they are still a prominent feature of this figure, but you can see that in this design they're very, very small. They're a lot shorter, they're a lot less uniform, they don't have a shared shape, they're just kind of jagged spikes, and they're a lot thinner. So it's just a very interesting change, because the spines obviously are one of the biggest features of Godzilla. So it's interesting to see that they changed them so much, but still managed to keep it a recognizable character. If we have a look at the body, you can see it's a lot thinner, a lot less broad with his shoulders, should we say. It's quite a deep body, but not very wide. He's got very, very short, stubby arms, which have a lot more sort of humanoid shape to them. His hands especially are very human in their sort of proportions. But his arms are very spindly, very little, which is reminiscent of Godzilla 1954 and the Bato era. So that's the Heisei era, sorry, which is quite interesting. That it does seem to still retain some design influences from the Japanese films. Just have another quick look at the skin texture. Very scaly, very more sort of like almost crocodile skin sort of design, especially on the chest. I had a crocodile skin wallet when I was a kid, and this chest sculpt is very similar to how sort of the texture on it was, so that's quite interesting. If we go down to his legs, he has very chunky legs, quite like the Heisei era and the 1954 era. Very chunky. The feet are very interesting. I think the feet are one of the most drastically changed thing in this design. They're very sort of almost elephant-like. These big, chunky, thick legs that go down to these little stumpy feet, and I think that's a really weird but very, very interesting design, and it's a signature part of this new Godzilla design. If we have a look at the tail, again, very chunky. Very thick and heavy looking up until obviously this tiny little bit at the end. But yeah, just a very, very different design, and I think at the same time that it's so different that it could easily be a different monster, it is at the same time quite clearly Godzilla. I think it still retains all of the elements of the original designs, enough so that you can tell who it is, but it's different enough to be very, very interesting. And you can tell by looking at it that Gareth Edwards, the director and designer of the new Godzilla films, I think you can tell by looking at his design that he is a Godzilla fan. And I think that's a very interesting element. He's clearly a fan of Godzilla, and that's very telling, and I think that's a good thing. When TriStar originally tried to redesign the character Godzilla, and they came out with Zilla, which I'll link a picture in the description if you haven't seen him. it was very, very wrong. It was a cool design, don't get me wrong. I've always thought Zilla was a very cool design, but it was not a tall Godzilla, and you could tell it was made by people who didn't really care that much for Godzilla. Whereas I think this design shows perfectly that Gareth is a Godzilla fan and really cares about Godzilla as a character, and I think that's why this figure has captured the feeling of Godzilla so well, whilst being such a different design to any of the previous incarnations. So in terms of sculpt and design, this figure is incredible, and I really, really like the redesign, to be honest. And I'm very, very happy with how he looked in the reboot. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about the sculpt. In terms of the paint job, like all of the figures we've looked at, really it's quite simple. This is the base color. You can always tell by the bottom of the feet what the base color of the vinyl is. There is some slight highlighting, but not really much noticeably. There is a sort of slightly browner colour on the chest and the underarms. I'm not really sure if the camera's picking that up well, but this is all a sort of slightly brown colour. The only other real paint is on his toenails and fingernails, which are black. There's a bit of white on his teeth. His eyes are orange, and he's got some purple in his mouth. Now, some of the purple from his mouth has spilled out into his face there on his nose and on this side, but I don't mind that. It kind of looks like cuts, so it kind of makes him look sort of slightly more battle damaged or whatever, which wasn't intentional, but I think, you know, it gets away with it. But yeah, design wise, I think this, in the film, he was very black like this figure is, and that was interesting because that was something that the Heisei era kind of had going for it, was that it was quite a black, almost dark grey colour. So I like that they've captured that quite well, and again, I like that it seems to clearly have taken different elements from different eras of the actual Japanese suits and not try and do too much different with it. So yeah, in terms of paint job, I pretty much have the same opinions I do with sculpt. It's clearly done, clearly been designed by someone who cares about the character, and I really, really like the way it looks. Now, of course, with this being a NECA figure, there's a lot of articulation to talk about. I won't spend too much time talking about the articulation because this will go on forever, but I will just show you the points of articulation. He has this one in his jaw here, which goes to about there and closes to about here. He has a joint here at the back of his head that can go about that far. He has one at the base of his neck, which can go 360 degrees. He has these two at his shoulders here, which will go 360 degrees, but are on a bit of a ball joint, so they all sort of move in different directions as well. He has a swivel sort of ball joint on his arm, which allows his upper arm to go like this and to rotate 360 degrees, and he has the same joints on his hands, and that's the same on both arms. At his midriff here, he does have a joint, but there's not much. There is a bit of up and down movement in it, but not a lot. It does go quite far to each side though, which is quite interesting. So that's one positive element of this figure. The legs will 360 degree articulate, which is nice. Again, they're on a bit of a swivelly ball joint there as well, so they will go sort of in and out a little bit as well. The knee joint articulation is absolutely pointless because it doesn't move at all on this figure and on this leg, and it does a little bit on this leg, but because of the sculpt it's pointless. The articulation on the feet will go up and down a little bit, but not much, but it will rotate 360 degrees. And finally, for the tail, there are lots of joints here. There's one here, which is 360 degrees. There's one here. There is one here. And then there's finally one here. This piece was separate, and you had to stick this on, but what this is all a thick rubber with a wire in it. So you can articulate this tail into different positions that you want, and it will stay in them. So I'm just going to, I've looked at the articulation very quickly because there's too much to say about it. There's so many points of articulation. I could spend a long time on this, but all of the joints are very good apart from the knees. There's a lot of movement. None of it's too stiff and none of it is too loose. The jaw on mine is slightly loose, but it wasn't when I got it. I think I've just moved the jaw so often that it's loosened off a bit. And like I said, the knees are pointless. I don't know why there's any articulation there because they just don't move at all. So it's almost a bit of a fake joint, really, at the knees. But hey, it doesn't hurt it too much. The articulation is spot on, and obviously it's a big selling point of the NECA figures anyway, so they've done it very well. This was actually a gift for my birthday from my girlfriend, but I know how much they go for roughly on Amazon, which is around 20 quid. or in 1999. So I think that's a really good price. I think it's, you know, I think it's worth a lot more. I think it's a lot better than some of the other NECA figures. So I think this figure should really demand a higher price. But yeah, you can get them on Amazon very, very easily. They're very easily available, and on eBay as well. On eBay they vary from seller to seller, but still not too expensive. So yeah, 20 quid for this is incredibly good value. They're worth a lot more than that to me. I think they could demand a much higher price, but I'm glad they don't. So yeah, pricing 20 quid, spot on, really, really good value. So would I recommend this figure? Without a shadow of a doubt, yes. And what do I think of the design? Well, I was really worried about the design before Godzilla 2014 came out. Obviously, I've grown up being a big Kaiju fan and a big Godzilla fan, and the last time the Americans tried to reboot it, it just didn't really work. I mean, as I've always said, I liked Godzilla 1998, and I liked the design of Zilla, but it was wrong and it wasn't Godzilla. It was a good design, but it just wasn't Godzilla. So I was really worried that in 2014 they would, again, do a really cool design, but it wouldn't be Godzilla. So when I finally saw the design and realized how different it was, but how close it felt to the originals, I was very happy. And I think this is... I'm very happy with this design because it was such a relief. It almost has a relief element to it that I was so worried that it would be a bad design, that I'm just so happy that it ended up being really, really awesome. So as a standalone film, Godzilla 2014 is excellent. It obviously doesn't fit in at all to the Japanese canon, but it is a very, very good film. So that's pretty much all I have to say. So thanks for sticking around for all 5 days of this special. I'm just going to line the figures up now so you can just have a quick look at what we looked at, if they all fit into shot here. But yeah, I think as a character, the evolution of Godzilla has been very, very interesting, and it's changed quite a lot over the years. But one thing I like about the character is that in each of his incarnations, it's not too different, and you can tell who it's meant to be. It's not like some of these redesigns you get where they don't look anything like how they're meant to look. Like, for example, Zilla. Zilla was an awesome design, but it was just wrong. And I think Godzilla is just one of those characters that you've really got to put your care and attention into, and I think Gareth Edwards did a perfect job. And I think Toho have done a perfect job of keeping the character consistent enough to be lovable, but changing him enough each time to keep things interesting. So with 2 more Godzilla films definitely at least confirmed, we've got another Gareth Edwards one coming in 2018, and we've got another Toho one apparently coming in 2016. It'll be interesting to have a look at those figures and those designs when the movies are released. If you guys liked this 5-part look at Godzilla, I would consider doing them for different monsters. Maybe have a look at Anguirus throughout the eras, or Gigan, or Rodan, or Ghidorah, or something like that, or just looking at different monsters and how they've changed throughout their appearances. So thanks for sticking around for this sort of experimental 5-part thing, and next weekend we'll hit back into the normal review schedule. And thanks a lot, guys. It's been interesting to have a look, and it's been interesting to try and do a 5-day thing. So sorry if it seemed a little bit rushed. It's the first time I've done something like this, and if I end up doing another marathon like this again, I will definitely be able to learn from any mistakes I've made this time round. So thanks, guys, and as always, like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.